Pacific Rim Uprising, the sequel to Guillermo del Toro's 2003 movie Pacific Rim. This one not directed by Guillermo del Toro. This is by Steven DeKnight, which is his first actual theatrical feature film debut as a director. Now, Del Toro had a really, really good 2017 with The Shape of Water, and I would have liked to have seen him come back to do Pacific Rim 2, because when Pacific Rim 1 came out, there was a lot of, love, or at least it appeared like there was a lot of love coming from him and a lot of desire from him to do the sequel. But even though he did not direct Pacific Rim Uprising, he was the producer, and I'm wondering if they're going to begin this sort of Pacific Rim franchise going forward. I can tell you that by the end of this movie, it certainly does appear that they're going to be making more of these movies. And really, when you go into a movie like Pacific Rim Uprising, it's just like the first Pacific Rim. Really, the first Pacific Rim had a lot of really good actors in it, but it wasn't a film that was driven by its, I guess you could say, thespian performances. It was a movie that was, at its core, a Japanese live-action anime type of movie with giant mecha robots fighting kaiju monsters, giant monsters. And in the film, the word kaiju is the word that's used for the genre of Japanese films that are all about giant monsters. So it was sort of like Guillermo del Toro's, big love affair. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like his big, I love you message to films like Godzilla, Gamera, and tons of anime, Mazinger. That this has been around forever in Japan. But giant robots and giant monsters in the past, although they appear to be something that Japan is really, really, big on, they work here too because of merchandising, because toys and cool robots are things that we like. As kids and whatnot. It worked out with Power Rangers and Gundam. This always works. And really, Pacific Rim Uprising does keep that same spirit of the first movie. Even without Del Toro being the director, it still keeps that sort of core story of it being giant robots against giant monsters. In fact, there are some twists near the end that essentially are things that you've seen before if you've watched this genre, but never in a Pacific Rim movie, but now they're kind of incorporating it in there. When it comes to the performances, John Boyega plays the son of Idris Elba's character from the first movie, Jake Pentecost, and the movie's not like a direct sequel. In other words, it's a sequel, but not a direct sequel. This movie could have been called Pacific Rim: The Next Generation because it takes place 10 years after the first movie. So it's like the next generation after the whole, Battle of the Breach, as they called it, the kaiju battle from the first movie. And it's funny because when you look at Pacific Rim, both this one and its predecessor, and you compare it to Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, one of the problems with Gareth Edwards' Godzilla is that you didn't really get enough action. It really wasn't action-packed. There was very little Godzilla, and at the end you had some cool fight scenes, but a lot of the movie was just really, really slow. This film and Pacific Rim really give you a lot of action, and to me, this is the bona fide popcorn flick of the month of March, in my opinion. This is the bona fide popcorn flick of the spring. Last year it was Logan, but the thing is that Logan had a lot of heart. Logan had a lot of emotion. This movie doesn't really hit me emotionally at all. John Boyega is a great actor, very likable guy, without question. Loved him in Force Awakens. I love him in everything he's in. In this movie, though, his character's a little bit inconsistent. He's likable, but he says some really dumb and kind of strange, off-putting things that seem uncharacteristic of him. Just kind of weird. And it's tough to really figure out if he's actually the main character, because I feel like, he's really not in some ways. Like in the story, it's kind of challenging because Boyega had to tackle a character that's both experienced and a mentor, but also at the same time, an underdog. And it really feels like the true main character of this, even though she's really not, is the character of Amara, played by Cailee Spaney. Like, that to me was kind of more so the main character. Boyega got the most screen time and was the hero alongside of her, but he's also doubling up as being somebody who's pretty confident in himself, but sometimes he shows signs of just having, not that much confidence and saying some things that are a little bit off-putting. Now, as far as this movie goes, like I said earlier, this is a popcorn flick and a half. If you want to go to the movie theater and not think too hard and just see a film that is a fun action romp with cool CGI effects and really a big CGI finale, which I thought was very fun and very well executed, this is the movie for you. You're not going to think a lot in this movie. This is no Three Billboards. This is no Shape of Water. And that's one thing I want to talk about real quick is when you review these films, when you criticize these movies, you have to know what you're getting into. Death Wish was directed by Eli Roth, for example, and people were criticizing it for being a little too wacky, but if you know Eli Roth's, film history, you know that he's not the most serious, realistic director. You see what I'm saying? So when you go into Pacific Rim Uprising, you have to know what it is that you're getting into. And at times, the film does feel like a pretty technically, masterful science fiction adventure story, but at other times it feels like some cheap science fiction film. It just depends on what scene we're talking about. There's some wonky acting in the movie. There's some, overly technological stuff that just really comes off a little cheap, and the characters come off, they try harder, I think, in this movie to humanize the characters than they did in the first Pacific Rim, but at the end of the day, it's still kaiju big battle action. You know what I'm saying? But at least it's not like the Michael Bay Transformers where it just has a terrible plot and a terrible, just really difficult and like special effects that are hard on the eyes. This movie's very easy on the eyes, and there are parts of the film that you don't get lost in this movie like you do a Transformers movie. It's very easy to follow, very, very simple storyline that works. I mean, this is a movie you can take kids to go see. There is a little bit of blood. I'm not going to lie. There's some violence. There's actually a sequence in the film where, Japan pretty much gets annihilated. I mean, it's almost like Man of Steel, where you have that fight at the end where Metropolis just got completely destroyed, and the heroes and the villains didn't give a damn about what was going on. It's kind of like that here. There's actually one scene in the film that was really, really stupid, where they go to a big city and you see civilians running away from buildings falling down and things blowing up, and then right afterward you have somebody say, "Oh, they've all retreated. Don't worry, all the civilians are underground." What? Like, we just saw them there. And they gave me flashbacks to like the old Dragon Ball Z English dub when they would say things like that to cover up like people dying. Like, for example, they would blow up a city and then you'd have somebody say, "Well, it's a good thing the city was evacuated." That's the original 95, 96 Dragon Ball Z dub. That's how this movie came off. Like, they're trying to like not scare the kids into thinking that those people died, but there's no question they survived. Plus, there's parts where the big battle at the end goes underground. Like, there's fights underground here, So it just really, the movie really does come off like an anime. Like, if you've seen like anime movies like this, it's even paced like one. Like, it just really reminds me of something from Japan. And in this movie, they actually go to Japan, which again, that had to have been a total homage to that entire genre. Now, there are parts of the movie that try to be funny, and it just falls on its face. I'm talking about, like, it's not quite as cringy as The Last Jedi, because that kind of humor was just bad, except for a couple parts. But here, the humor really comes from John Boyega's character, but also Charlie Day, who plays Newt. He is totally played up for laughs. And there's a couple of, comedic parts here and there that are so predictable that when the punchline happens, it doesn't even really hit. And he came off, in my opinion, more annoying than funny. There were some people in the movie theater that laughed at him. I just saw him being more like annoying. It's almost like a more obnoxious, villainous version of Tony Stark, except without the wit. That's how he came off like in this movie. And by the way, for the record, I'm a huge fan of Charlie. From all the way back to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like, I'm a huge fan of that guy. And it just didn't work out for that, in this movie. Overall, if you're going to ask me, should I go see this movie? It's a fun date movie. It's a fun movie to take kids to. It's a fun toy commercial, and it worked because the designs of the robots and the monsters are so cool that they prey on my little 10-year-old inside of me. I want to get these toys someday because they look freaking cool and the mech fights are cool. It's basically a big kids movie is what it is, and Yeah, I think it is worth checking out. You know, if you want a popcorn film, not the most intelligent movie ever, but you shouldn't be expecting that. If not, then save your money and check it out on Redbox. I don't think it's worth repeated viewings, to be honest with you. Just like the first one, I actually like the first one. You know, I like it, but it just isn't one of those movies that I watch over and over and over again. Same thing with this one. You watch it once or twice, you know, with some kids around, maybe they like it. I just don't see it really hitting, you know, like other movies have done. But I think that this one is certainly a lot better than the 98 Godzilla and the 2014 Godzilla as far as capturing the kaiju spirit. I mean, way more, way more. This and the predecessor. And I do wish that Del Toro would keep making more movies like this, even though I love the independent styled, you know, more artsy films that he does because they are brilliant. You know, I like his popcorn movies too for the most part. I don't like everything he's done, but he's pretty good at it. I wish he'd come back and direct the third one because there definitely will be a third one. At least I depending on how much money this one makes, of course. So overall, those are my thoughts, and bye.